fevered spring.
A Wanda Winnett tale.
Chapter 1. In the beginning, there was light. At first, it was only a tiny dot. Bright and cold, like a star that had come very close. Around the growing light, shadows folded and unfolded in the gentlest way. Though the baby didn't yet know what colors were, she saw something that looked the way sunrise feels when you're still half asleep and very warm. She watched it the way you might watch a butterfly landing on a flower. Not wanting to blink, not wanting to miss even a moment. The light grew bigger and brighter. All around the white light, there were soft colors and warm darkness. Like when you close your eyes after looking at something beautiful. She moved toward the light. Not because she decided to. More like floating on water, when the current is gentle and knows exactly where it's going. It felt a little bit like coming home, though she didn't know yet what home meant. At 3, Wanda was a remarkably clear speaker, and already something of a deep thinker. One day, while she sat on the porch steps of their cottage, intently watching her mother's graceful brushstrokes on canvas in the cold morning sun, she suddenly said, "I remember that color, Mommy." Her tiny fingers pointing to a spot in the sky, just above the horizon. The sun shone through billowing clouds, with sections of pastels, pink, orange, and even some dark blue, as if they still had some nighttime left in them. Her mother turned to look at her, then towards the sunrise. She moved from her stool to sit next to the little girl on the steps, wiping her hands on an apron that was once pure white, but now resembled the wooden palette she used to mix paints, in search of a million perfect shades. "What do you remember about it, sweetheart?" her mother asked.
Well,
Wanda began.
first, it was all dark and warm, but then there was a little light, and the shadows looked like that.
She squealed with excitement as she pointed at a large plume of cloud that had taken on the softest hue of orange pink. Her mother's eyes widened slightly. Then she smiled warmly. "What would you name that color?" she asked. The little girl placed her thumb under her chin, as if in deep contemplation. After a moment, she proclaimed, her eyes shining brightly.
Baby peach.
"Baby peach," her mother repeated. "I don't think I've ever heard of that one," she said, as she stood.
I think I'm the first one to remember it.
Wanda giggled. Her mother reached back for her daughter's hand as she said, "Well, maybe we should paint a special picture, so that we'll never forget it." All that morning and on into the afternoon, they painted together. Her mother squeezed colors onto her wooden palette and watched Wanda swirl the brush. White, a touch of pink, a coil of soft gold. Round and round, the little girl painted spirals, curling in toward the center and some expanding outwardly. Her small brow furrowed in concentration. "What is it?" her mother asked, when Wanda seemed satisfied with her creation.
It's where I came from,
Wanda said.
It's what the light looked like, and it means I'm supposed to remember.
Her mother didn't argue. She didn't laugh either. She just nodded slowly and whispered, "Then we'll keep it safe." She found a frame in the hall closet, wooden, gently arched, and slid the painting inside. She hung it in Wanda's room, just above her bed. Wanda looked up at it every night, and as she grew older, she would not forget. That night, after the spiral was hung, her mother did one more thing. She pulled out the blanket she had made. When she first found out she was going to be a mother, it was still soft, still threaded with hand-knotted care, pale pinkish orange, almost glowing in the dusk, the same color as Wanda's spiral painting. She laid it gently over Wanda as she slept, and whispered, "For your journey here, and for the journey ahead." The birds returned, because they remembered, not with maps, not with plans, with pull. Each year, the air changed in ways most people barely noticed. The edges softened, the cold loosened its grip on bark and beam. The wind carried familiar scents, wood warmed by hands, smoke drifting from a chimney, the faint sweetness of grain, stored through winter. The birds felt it, long before the humans named it. They would circle the cottage once, then again, and there, just where it had always been, the beam above the porch waited for them. The old nest clung to the wood, weathered but faithful. Twigs had loosened, straw had thinned, but the shape remained. That was enough. The mama bird landed first, her small claws testing the beam carefully. The papa bird lifted away again almost immediately, returning with a thin strand of grass. Then another, then a narrow strip of something softer he had found near the fence. Rebuild, layer by layer. It was never a matter of starting over. It was a matter of strengthening what had already held. Below them, the small human, Wanda, often sat cross-legged in the yard and watched. She did not shout. She did not clap. She watched. Her eyes followed every flight, every landing, every twig placed carefully into the growing weave of the nest. The birds felt her attention, the way they felt wind, present, but not pressing. They could tell she meant no harm to them, because she kept her distance. Days passed, eggs appeared, stillness followed. Stillness is not idleness, it is labor without motion. The mama bird settled low into the nest, while the papa bird returned again and again, with food. The rhythm was patient and constant. Wanda returned every day. She tilted her head sometimes, almost as the birds did, studying the quiet persistence of the work above her. One afternoon, she reached her small fingers toward the nest. Before she could touch it, a sharp voice rang from the porch beam.
"Rah! Don't touch it! Rah!"
Ernest, the bright and opinionated bird, who had made Tick Cottage his home. Wanda's fingers stopped in midair. She withdrew her hand immediately. The nest remained undisturbed. Trust grows in moments like that. Soon, the eggs trembled, the shells gave way. Hunger announced itself loudly, in a chorus of tiny open beaks and wobbling necks. Feed, return, feed, return. The rhythm did not change. Wanda watched as the fragile bodies slowly strengthened. She leaned close sometimes, though never too close. She counted the hatchlings. In whispers she did not realize she was speaking. The nest grew crowded. Wings stretched against one another. The rim of the nest seemed narrower each day, as the young birds shifted and jostled for space. Then, there came a morning when one fledgling stood longer than the others. Its balance wavered. The wind pressed lightly against its feathers. Below, Wanda inhaled sharply. The fledgling leaped. For a moment it fell. Then the air caught beneath its wings. Lift. Wanda gasped, not in fear, but in wonder. One by one, the others followed. The nest emptied. Silence settled. where noise had been. The mama and papa birds remained only briefly after. There is no mourning and departure among birds, only continuation. Soon, they too lifted into the sky and circled once more above the cottage. Before leaving, the beam remained, the nest remained, memory remained. When the air would sharpen again, in autumn, and soften once more the spring, the pole would return. It always did. Below the porch, Wanda stood and waved her hands toward the empty nest. She did not reach for it again. By then, she understood something she had not known before. Some things are not meant to be held. Some things are meant only to be watched as they grow strong enough to fly.
The ground holds more than most people notice. Frost, footprints, seeds, ash, all of it presses downward, eventually settling into the soil where time begins its quiet work. Through winter, the earth tightens. Cold locks the upper soil into stiffness. Moisture hardens between grains. Roots wait without complaint. Stones contract quietly in the dark beneath the surface. Creatures burrow deeper, curling into small chambers of warmth where breathing slows. The ground does not resent winter. Winter is part of they. Turning. Snow settles over fields and hills, covering the earth. In pale stillness, what appears frozen above often protects what is waiting below. The snow insulates. It melts slowly. Water threads downward through the soil in narrow paths. Tanuai, Kenfalo. Then, one morning, something changes. Not loudly, not suddenly. The air carries a slightly different weight. The sun lingers half a breath longer above the horizon. Before slipping away again, the light arrives at a softer angle across the frozen fields. The frost does not vanish. It loosens. A seam opens beneath the crust. Water begins to move. Pressure eases. The uppermost layer softens, just enough for the smallest root to press forward. Across the fields, thin wisps of vapor begin to rise, where sunlight meets the lingering cold. To human eyes, it looks like breath leaving the earth. It is not breath. It is exchange. Warmth meeting cold must release something. Wanda noticed it one morning. Her boots carried her slowly across the yard, toward the edge of the field where the frost had begun to break apart. Into darker patches of soil she crouched and placed her small palm against the ground. Her hand was warm. The earth registered the warmth, the way it registers rain, without judgment, without preference. Wanda felt the softness beneath her fingers. To her, it seemed sudden, as if the change had happened overnight. But nothing beneath the soil
arrives overnight.
The thaw had been preparing itself for weeks. Under the frozen crust, worms had already begun their slow movement through narrow tunnels. Sap had started rising within the trees long before the branches showed any sign of it. Tiny fractures in the hardened soil had widened, grain by grain, with every quiet shift of temperature. Spring rarely announces itself with noisy. It arrives through patience. Wanda stood again and watched the faint vapor rising from the fields. She did not speak. She simply observed. Her boots pressed into the softer ground, testing whether the earth would hold her weight. It did. Roots stretched cautiously through the dark. Beneath her feet, stones settled into new positions. Far below the frost line, the deep roots of the walnut tree drew upward the quiet promise of another growing season. The walnut tree did not hurry. Trees never hurry. They extend when the tension in the soil allows them to extend. Nothing more. Wanda walked the length of the field and back again. With each step, she grew more confident in the gentle yielding of the ground beneath her boots. By afternoon, the frost had retreated further into shaded corners of the field. By evening, a thin ribbon of water began threading its way toward the lower meadow. Winter did not shatter. It thinned. Wanda looked out across the horizon as if she had witnessed a miracle. But the earth had only done what it had always done. It held, it released, it softened when light insisted. Long enough. And somewhere within that quiet exchange, the girl began to understand, though she had no language yet for the understanding. That change is rarely a single, loud moment. More often, it is the slow easing of pressure. It is light returning. It is time doing its work patiently and without announcement.
I never trusted a person who talks too much about hard work. Hard work doesn't need announcing, it announces itself. The walnuts fall, whether anybody's ready for 'em or not. They hit the ground with that same dull thud every year. If you leave 'em, they rot. If you take 'em up too quick, you miss half of 'em. Timing matters. That's why I notice who watches the ground and who only watches the sky. The girl from the next farm over, Wanda, she watches the ground. She comes with her mama every year when the thaw's soft enough to give underfoot. The first few times she came, she moved like most kids do. Quick, distracted, hopeful the job'll finish by itself if she hurries. It don't work that-a-way. Walnuts hide under leaves. They get wedged between roots. They wait to get stepped on if you don't go looking for 'em. I let her hurry at first. There's no lesson in stopping somebody before they learn. By the third basket, she slowed down. She started placing 'em carefully, checking for cracks, measuring weight in her hands. She didn't complain, that's the thing. Some folks mistake quiet for lack of spirit. It ain't always. Sometimes it's focus. Grandpa Tick's tree stands at the edge of the field where the slope starts. Big old thing. Roots like knuckles pushing up through the ground. Folks say Wanda's grandpa planted it. That might be true. Might be older than that. Or younger. Hard to tell with trees. It produces, whether the winter's hard or not. You treat a tree like that with respect. Wanda does. I watched her one afternoon while her mama went back to their cottage for picnic supplies. She stayed under the branches by herself with a half-full basket. The wind picked up and dropped 3 walnuts real quick at her feet. She didn't jump. She waited for 'em to land and sit still. Then she picked 'em up one by one. There's a kind of stillness that looks like thinking, but ain't. Really, it's alignment. Your hands pick up the rhythm before your brain names it. By late afternoon that day, she had fallen into that rhythm. Bend, lift, sort, place. Bend, lift, sort, place. No fidgeting, no sighing. When she stood up, it wasn't to complain. It was to scan for the next cluster. I asked her once, "Ain't you tired yet?" She thought about that question carefully. "No," she said, "I feel steady." Steady, that's a word most folks miss. There tends to be a selfishness in work you need applause for. There's steadiness in work that just needs doing. Wanda doesn't work to be seen. She works because the walnuts are there. That tree has outlived arguments, storms, and more than one hard winter. Its roots run deeper than the frost line. It don't move when wind shouts at it. It bends enough, and then it keeps standing. I reckon that's what I saw in Wanda. Not brilliance, maybe, but not spectacle. Roots. One day, she stood with her hand against the trunk of her grandpa's tree, palm flat to the bark, like she might have been measuring something invisible. She wasn't talking. She wasn't asking. She was listening. I didn't interrupt. There's a lot a person can learn from a tree that keeps producing without complaint. When we finished loading the last of the baskets that year, she brushed some dirt off her work apron and looked out past the slope. "Mr. Smedley," she asked, "what happens to the ones we miss?" "They feed the ground," I told her, "or they grow." She nodded, happy with that. Some things fall and get gathered. Some things fall and take root. The field doesn't waste either one. I've seen enough seasons to know you can't force growth. You can only prepare the ground and show up when it's time to collect. Wanda shows up. That's enough.
I remember heat. Not the kind that comes from sun. The kind that presses from inside your skin. It made the air heavy. It made my thoughts move slowly like they were pushing through water. I was lying down, then I was standing. I don't remember standing up. The ground beneath me felt strange, not because it was rough, because it didn't respond to my weight. I looked down at my hands. They were there, but light went through them too easily. I could see the dirt beyond my fingers. I moved them closer to my face. They blurred at the edges. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel cold. I felt disconnected. The place around me was green, a garden maybe. Rows of something, newly turned. The smell of dirt rose in steady waves. It felt entirely unfamiliar. A brightly colored bird watched me from a low branch. It did not fly away. That seemed important. I stepped forward. The grass didn't bend. I stepped harder. Nothing changed. That scared me more than falling would have. There was a girl kneeling in the dirt. She had her hands pressed into the soil, as if she were listening to it. She looked up. She saw me. I knew she saw me because her eyes changed. Not in fear, in recognition. No one had looked at me like that before.
Are you lost?
She asked. Her voice didn't echo the way mine felt inside my head. Lost. The words seemed right. I don't know, I managed to say. The sound of my voice startled me. It felt thinner than I expected, like wind slipping through a crack. I looked down at my chest. I could see the faint outline of myself, but beyond that, I could see the row of seedlings behind me. I raised my arms and turned them slowly. I was there and not. The girl stood up carefully, brushing dirt from her apron. She didn't come toward me. She didn't run away either. She stood still, as if sudden movements might break something fragile between us. The bird tilted its head. The air felt lighter here than where I had been before. Where had I been before? There was a room, heat, a ceiling. The memory slipped before I could hold it. I felt a pull, not from the girl, not from the ground, but from somewhere behind my ribs. It was the same kind of pull that had lifted me from lying down to standing. I did not want to go. That surprised me. This place was quiet. The girl's presence was steady.
I don't think you're from here.
She said softly. I almost laughed. I didn't feel from anywhere. The edges of my hands started to thin more. I tried to press my palm into the soil beside her. It passed through the surface like the ground was made of fog. The sensation was neither warm nor cold. It was absence. I pulled back. The pull inside my chest grew stronger. The girl did not reach for me. She stayed where she was. That felt like kindness.
Will you come back?
She asked. I didn't know what coming back might mean. I didn't know what leaving meant. The garden got brighter, or maybe I got lighter. The seedlings all around me blurred. The bird gave a small, sharp sound. Not surprise, but awareness. The girl's outline sharpened as mine faded. For a second, I could see through myself completely. The garden stayed solid. The girl stayed solid. I felt something like regret, though I could not name what I was losing. Then, the pull completed its work. The green dissolved. The girl's face was the last thing I saw clearly. She was not afraid. That mattered.
My name is Wanda.
I heard her say. Then I was nowhere again, or in somewhere else. I did not know which. I blinked my eyes open suddenly. They were heavy, as if I had just finished a deep, long sleep.
A knock came mid-morning. I knew it wasn't a neighbor. Neighbors don't knock that way. Careful, but formal, like the wood might object. Wanda opened the door. A young man stood straight-backed, hat in hand, boots dusted from travel. He was in military gear. He did not feign familiarity. That's always the first sign of good character.
Hello, my name's Isaac. I have a letter for the lady of the house,
He said. He handed it to me. The name on the envelope was mine. The handwriting was familiar. Edith Taratik. I didn't read it in front of the group. There are some things that must be processed alone. I stepped into a smaller room and broke the wax seal. The words were exactly what I expected, and nothing I wanted. I read them once, then again. When I returned, the young man stood exactly where I had left him. He had not moved his feet. He had not glanced about the room. Come on inside while I prepare my reply, I said. It might take a while. He nodded. 3 weeks isn't long enough to know a person completely. It's long enough to observe. The animals observed him first, closely. Poochie had watched from the shade of the porch steps. The old elk hound had taken it upon himself years ago to greet newcomers with silence rather than barking. His thick silver coat lifted slightly in the breeze as he studied Isaac with steady patience. Spike was less reserved. The blue tick hound circled, nose low to the ground, as if the truth of a person could be tracked through dust alone. He passed close enough to Isaac's boots to catch the scent of travel, then moved away again, satisfied but still thoughtful. Peanut bounded around without ceremony. The little shepherd mix believed that introductions were unnecessary. When Joy was available, he placed both front paws briefly against Isaac's knee before dropping back down and wagging so vigorously. His whole body wobbled. Isaac often crouched to scratch the dogs behind their ears.
Friendly bunch,
he had said. Most days, I replied. Unsurprisingly, the one who took the longest to approach him was Sikta. During Isaac's time at Tick Cottage, the cat had taken up residence along the fence rail, where the sun warmed the wood. Her narrow golden eyes watched every exchange. Tail wrapped neatly around her paws, cats have little patience for the theater of greetings. They, most often, wait for the room to settle. Isaac would glance up toward her.
well,
He'd say quietly.
you look like yours is the opinion that matters the most.
Sikta would blink slowly in response. After a while she rose, stepped down from the rail, and crossed the yard with careful precision. She stopped a short distance from Isaac and sat again, regarding him from below. Isaac did not reach for her. He simply rested his hands on his knees and waited. That, more than anything else, seemed to satisfy her. She stood, brushed lightly against his boot as she passed, and continued on her way toward the porch steps, where Poochie kept watch. The animals returned to their lounging. Peanut settled beside Isaac's boots. Spike wandered toward the orchard, nose always chasing some invisible trail. Wanda said nothing during these exchanges, but I noticed the little smile she tried not to show. Animals have a habit of deciding certain questions before people do, and by the look of things, they had already begun making up their minds about this young messenger. I noted that Isaac rose early, that he asked before beginning tasks. He did not speak over others. He carried water without spilling it. These are not grand virtues. They are steady ones. Wanda watched him without seeming to. She did not change herself in his presence. She did not soften or sharpen her voice to meet his. She remained exactly as she was when alone. That mattered more to me than anything they might have said. I wrote my reply in the evenings. I did not rush. A rushed letter invites error. The matter contained within required neither anger nor flourish. It required clarity. Some obligations are inherited, some are chosen, some are postponed for a generation and then return, with new faces. When I finally sealed the envelope, I pressed the wax carefully. Isaac would carry it where it needed to go. That much I trusted. On his final morning with us, he stood at the table waiting for instruction, though none was required. Please see that your captain receives this intact, I told him.
I will,
he replied. I watched Wanda walk him to the gate. I didn't follow. There are moments a mother must allow to unfold, without witness. From the window, I saw them stand facing one another. Words passed between them, though I could not hear them. He leaned forward briefly. Wanda didn't step away. Then he turned. She stayed at the gate, longer than she needed to. When she came back inside, she didn't speak immediately. I didn't ask her to. She picked up her work. There's a particular quiet that follows the departure of someone who has been present long enough to change a room's rhythm. It's not grief, it's adjustment. I sat down at my writing table.
We agreed to send each other letters,
Wanda said softly, without stopping or looking up. That's good, I replied.
He said he'll come back here one day.
I have a feeling he will, sweetheart, I told her, though I could feel an extraordinary but familiar weight in the air. Outside, Grandpa Tick's tree stood firm, against a light wind. Roots hold whether we notice them or not. Isaac would carry the message, Wanda would carry her steadiness. And the season would continue, as it always does, toward whatever next turn awaits it.
Wanda had been helping for several years at the Smedley Cooperative, the local food bank and homeless shelter, when she crossed paths with Jenny Rood and her father, Ross. As she stood, wrapping small paper napkins around mismatched sets of silverware, a young girl spotted her. The moment she and her father walked in the double doors at the entrance, without a word, she sprinted directly towards Wanda, leaving her father frantically scanning the crowd for her.
I dreamed you were an old lady,
An excited but tiny voice said. Behind Wanda. Wanda paused and looked up, then turned to her left to regard her new friend. She absent-mindedly placed the silverware in her hands back in their tray and knelt before Jenny as she said,
Well, that sounds like a lovely dream.
They both smiled. The little girl suddenly threw herself into a tight bear hug with Wanda, who immediately and fully embraced her in return. A man approached the two, as if he were embarrassed of a rogue butterfly. I'm sorry, he said in Wanda's direction, as he gently redirected his daughter's shoulders into position just in front of him. The scene reminded Wanda of images she had seen, of men in elaborate uniforms, guarding members of royalty. The thought made her smile. She stood and replied,
Oh, goodness. Hugs will always be free.
She exchanged a knowing glance with the little girl, who giggled. The man smiled cautiously, but kindness registered behind his tired eyes, and he relaxed a bit. I'm Ross Rood, he said. As he extended his hand, Wanda grasped it and said,
I'm Wanda.
Nice to meet you, said Mr. Rood. This is my daughter, Jenny.
Oh, we've met,
Wanda said, scrunching her nose a little and smiling at the little girl.
Once upon a dream.
Mr. Rood had fallen on hard times and wanted to help others, while he helped himself. Jenny's mother had retreated with the previous winter, leaving the two of them on their own. Together, Wanda thought again about the image of a guardsman, ensuring the constant safety and comfort of his tiny queen. They worked side by side the entire day and made an efficient team. Mr. Rood could get things from any high shelf, and Wanda's hands fit into spaces he had to accept as off limits to him. Even Jenny discovered a hidden talent for greeting people as they meandered into the place in search of aid and comfort. Wanda found herself in awe many days of how many people in need could find their way to her small town from all over the world. She was always happy to help. Wanda focused with a jolt when a familiar sight entered her periphery. A blanket, crocheted by hand, and a shade she had seemingly always known, Baby Peach.
That's a sweet blanket,
she said to Mr. Rood. He looked up. Oh yeah, that was a gift. Someone left it for me, just when I needed it most. This past winter, almost like a dream that came true. I guess I'll never know who they were, but I'll always be thankful for him. Jenny laid claim to it as soon as she laid eyes on it. Hasn't parted with it since, I don't think. Wanda remembered placing a blanket her mother made on a man in the street that winter. She decided to allow the blanket to form its own tale. She couldn't be perfectly certain it was once hers anyway, and besides, her mother always taught her that good deeds are best done in the dark. Jenny sat in a chair near the front doors, holding her beloved blanket with her left arm, and moving her right thumb to her mouth, a deep yawn, only briefly evicting it. Wanda watched her and smiled as she worked. Seeing this, Mr. Rood leaned towards Wanda, as if sharing a secret. She named it, he said.
Named what?
Wanda asked. The blanket, he replied. She calls it Evander, says he's her best friend. I don't have the heart to tell her anything different. Things haven't been easy for her. He looked at his daughter for a long moment, with what Wanda could tell was sadness behind his eyes and regret. She gently placed a hand on his.
Your daughter is loved,
Wanda said, as she locked eyes with the man.
That is your job, and she will thank you for it one day, as long as you keep showing up.
She smiled. He smiled back. She gave his hand a little squeeze and returned to her task.
Evander is a pretty name,
she added. It is, Mr. Rood replied, brightly. Once all the work was done, the lights had been extinguished, and the doors were secured for the evening. Wanda and Mr. Rood said goodnight. He headed one way, carrying a sleeping child. She, going the other direction, with an uncanny sense of growth, as if seeds had been planted that just may bloom into something wonderful. She had traversed a few blocks when someone else crossed her path, quite suddenly. The road was empty and golden. Wanda's boots made soft sounds in the dust. She passed the sycamores, then the old stone well, then the baker's wall, with the ivy that always reached too far. And then, just before the final turn, she saw him. A man, staggering. He was muttering to himself, pacing in quick, uneven circles. His hair was wild. His coat hung open. His words were jumbled and jagged. As she passed, he snapped his head toward her and shouted, You said you'd kill me. Wanda froze. He stepped closer, hands twitching. I know you. You're one of them. His eyes were wild, glazed with something more than fear. Wanda lifted her hands instinctively, palms out. A small space of breath between them.
No,
she said, gently.
I'm not.
He stepped closer. Too close. He kept repeating the same incoherent accusations. She could hear her heart now, feel her breath catch.
I'm not,
she said again, softer. Then, something shifted.
I know,
she said, almost whispering.
I know. It's okay.
Her voice was calm. Her shoulders softened. Her hands made small, slow circles in the air, like brushing dust from a windowsill. She didn't argue. She empathized. The man blinked. His posture relaxed and straightened a bit. He stepped back. His face crumpled, and his voice dropped to a murmur. It's okay. It's okay. He repeated. He wandered off, muttering, toward the dark. Wanda stood there a while, her arms still loose at her sides. The sky above her was velvet blue, fading to black. She didn't cry. She didn't shiver, though she was quite shaken. She simply breathed, and when she finally turned to walk again, she realized that her hands and tongue had remembered something her mind had not. Some old language of peace, written into her bones. Some blessing, maybe, passed down from mothers to daughters. 2 daughters, again. In the weeks that followed, tension in Havenlight grew sharper. News arrived from distant cities, each report a little more troubling than the last. Wanda woke with her hand pressed to her heart, and tears already on her face. She didn't remember falling asleep. She barely remembered getting into bed, but she remembered the dream. Jenny was standing in a shallow pool of water. Her dark curls were damp, her face radiant.
I dreamed you were an old lady,
she said. Smiling, Wanda tried to respond, in the dream, to ask what she meant, but no sound came. Jenny just looked at her for a long moment, then turned and walked into a light so soft it barely shimmered. And Wanda, still dreaming, began to cry. An unseasonably late and historically severe winter storm materialized that morning. The federal agents had received clear orders: use excessive force at will. One agent understood why, in a way virtually none of his comrades seemed to. Cruelty was the point. Fear, the intended impact. Silence, the desired outcome. He also recognized the high likelihood of tragedy occurring. In the tinderbox his agency would effectively create with the day's operation, they were to impose chaos and to ensure the volatility of their own forces. They would descend upon innocent people from many different cultures. The occasion was the annual sports exhibition. Honestly, he looked forward to obliging, to obeying what he did recognize to be illegal orders. Orders that were in opposition to the human decency that he himself, in his view, had always been denied. When he found himself in the din of the moment, in a place completely unfamiliar to him, his focus settled on a single little girl. She was crying and clinging to a blanket that was the most peculiar color. He thought about a man that had come to be nicknamed Alec the Agitator by the agent and his peers. On another day and in another place, the agitator had hurled insulting words at the agent, words that the agent had found to be surprisingly chilling. He instantly felt enraged again. Then, the unthinkable happened. Nearby, one of his fellow agents opened fire on one of the frantic civilians who were scrambling to escape. The sudden madness that he and his comrades had expertly caused. He lost track of the number of shots that rang out in quick succession, in sharp cracks that rattled everyone's bones. He watched the victim fall. Then, when the firing finally stopped, he watched his teammates clap their hands and cheer. They were celebrating the injustice. As he stood motionless and in a state of momentary shock, his paradigm collapsed in on itself, and an entirely different and foreign set of thoughts took center stage in his mind. People ran around him, either screaming in terror or barking incoherent threats and orders. "This can't become normal," he said, out loud, as if his thoughts were connected directly to his mouth. He remembered the little girl with the blanket and turned to see that she had moved closer to the side of the bridge, and she still stood there, alone, still crying and looking around. In terrified bewilderment, he heard a man's voice rising above the crowd and turned to see him nearby, calling out a name again and again. "Jenny." "Daddy!" the little girl shrieked, suddenly raising her hands high in the direction of the man's voice. In an instant, the agent made a decision, one the world could never forget, should never forget. Before her father could reach her, the agent rushed towards her. In one fluid motion, he picked the little girl up, lifting her off the ground by her winter coat. He tossed her over the edge, into the icy waters. Far below, still without really thinking, the agent then intercepted the panicked man, Ross Rood. Just before he could reach the railing, At the side of the bridge, he continued holding Mr. Root in place, for reasons he could neither understand nor explain. As he tried to get to the shore below, desperate to save his little girl's life. After the agent finally let poor Mr. Root go free, he gingerly looked over the edge of the bridge once more. Then he casually joined his comrades as they, finally, left the scene, leaving behind a stunned and grieving crowd of unsuspecting bystanders, left to process the living nightmare they had just experienced together. As the caravan of federal agents slowly pulled away, the agent saw people with cameras pointed directly at him. He held up his right hand and displayed his first 2 fingers. As shutters clicked, one last time. I might get away with it anyway, he thought to himself, bitterly. Wanda stumbled on nothing as she walked down the sidewalk, and saw the first of several photos that would soon consume all the front page spaces of virtually all newspapers and publications around the world. A small face she knew well, eyes closed, swaddled in an equally familiar blanket. She blinked through tears to examine it more closely. She bought a copy of the Having Light Commons and sat down on the curb to read the tragic story. She openly sobbed, in spite of herself. The photo was black and white, but Jenny's blanket was not. In the weeks following the tragedies, people were glued to their radios. They bought entire bundles of newspapers to give to their friends, family, and neighbors. All anyone could talk about, or argue about, was the little girl on the bridge. Some said she was just sleeping in the photo. Some people actually insisted she never existed at all. Everyone remembered her in the photo. Wanda stayed near her cottage and sat down to write a story. Evander of the Meadow, a simple story about a little boy who befriends a little girl and helps her on her way. The cold outside deepened. Amid growing confusion, Wanda remembered what was real and tried to share it with others, the best ways she knew how. Mr. Smedley came around sometimes to visit with Wanda. He noticed her multiple recent absences, at mealtimes, at the cooperative. After every visit, he would find himself carrying away a sack or 2 of the delicious offerings that seemed to always be flowing from Wanda's kitchen. He offered once to add her to the paid staff at the cooperative, if it would help to keep her engaged with the community. He explained that he wouldn't want her to feel alone during such a challenging era of Having Light history. She politely thanked him for always remembering her. Mr. Smedley, she sighed, I look forward to helping the community, however I can, for now. Telling my tales is the most important thing I can do. Mr. Smedley smiled warmly, reaching out to give Wanda's hand a gentle squeeze. I think you just might be right, Don. He turned to carry the bags of stews, breads, and cookies back to town, but turned around to say, Oh, I almost forgot. The board at the cooperative wants to name the new preschool after you. What do you think of Wanda's Wee Wonders? Wanda blushed a little and chuckled as she responded, If little ones can grow to think of me when they think of kindness, what more could any Wanda ever ask for? She smiled. You have my glowing seal of approval. Great news, said Mr. Smedley. The board, and all the little ones, will be thrilled to hear it. Thank ya, Miss Tick. He spun on his heels and headed back up the path, blessings in hand, and with good news to share.
There are rooms where decisions are made without raised voices or prying eyes. We preferred such rooms. We had come to be known as the More Lemon class. We gathered around polished tables where glass reflected our faces back at us cleanly, in softened light. The windows were high enough that street noise did not intrude. Reports lay arranged in precise stacks. Photographs were passed hand to hand with careful, secretive fingers. The images from the bridge lay among them. A girl wrapped in a blanket. It was not at all the first troubling image we had managed. It would surely not be the last. What people see, Jim said calmly, is often shaped by what they expect to see. Heads nodded, as they always seemed to when Jim spoke. Expectation could be influenced, memory could be guided, language could be adjusted. Color is subjective, Miss Moore observed. She didn't say it angrily, she said it matter-of-factly. Most agreed that the threads in the blanket held a faint tint. When shown the image, people almost always described the tint in the exact same way. Baby peach. A soft and inexplicable phrase, too soft for our purposes. We needed people angry, not saddened, outraged, not melancholic. Agreement, though, is not the same as authority, and authority, we had come to believe, rested in framing. If we describe the blanket as white, Jim offered, and repeat that description across all channels, doubt will enter the conversation. Doubt is useful. Widely sown doubt prevents the wide acceptance of certainty. We did not argue that the girl was not gone. We didn't have to. We suggested instead that perspective might be flawed, that a moment captured at the wrong angle could mislead, that grief can alter perception, that people can be led to disbelieve their own eyes and ears. She looks like she's sleeping, someone quietly pointed out. The words were gentle, harmless. Useful. Sleeping does not provoke outrage. Sleeping invites patience. The group approved the phrasing. Across networks aligned with our agenda, the language shifted aggressively. There was a white blanket. There was a sleeping child. Statements to the contrary were characterized as unfortunate misunderstandings, or worse. The corrections campaign began, as innumerable campaigns like it had done, unimpeded for many years. As president, Mr. Lemon rarely attended the smaller meetings of the class he helped keep in power. He preferred stages and worshippers. Those were his weapons of choice against any he might ever perceive to be his enemy, against any who might dissent to any of his volatile whims, even against his own disciples in our elite class. He spoke outwardly often toward foreign lands with sharp certainty that he never earned. He declared strength. He warned of instability without him. He promised calamitously decisive actions. Just behind him, our clandestine network managed public perception. Perception is quieter than volume, but perception decides reality. It decides which stories people will repeat. We understood that control rarely requires brute force once perception is pliable. Reports from the exhibition grounds were edited. Footage was reframed. Commentators were provided strict talking points. Funding shifted toward outlets willing to repeat our revised language without their own embellishment or independence. At times it seemed the people of Havenlight might tire of the fight. People often do. Outrage exhausts itself when fed confusion. But something extraordinary happened. The people did not tire. They gathered in lantern-lit assemblies and passed the image of the little girl among themselves. They leaned close. They traced the threads with steady fingers. I see it, they would say. I'd call it Baby Peach. I do see it. The words were not spoken loudly, not violently, just clearly. We adjusted our strategies again. We shifted focus elsewhere, introduced new controversies, redirected attention to distant threats. We spread disinformation and fostered rampant misinformation. We discredited local witnesses, labeled dissent as instability. Each of these measures had always worked before. This time the adjustments slowed, but did not reverse the spread. A truth began circulating that was beyond our influence or control. That if a thing is written down, it may not be erased. Documentation had been accumulating and was finally being reviewed. Financial links surfaced that were meant to stay hidden. Communications long assumed secure were read aloud in rooms far less polished than the ones the More Lemon class had grown to expect. We did not panic. We tightened. Control the narrative, Jim repeated. But narrative is not empty clay when too many hands are shaping it. President Lemon's speeches grew sharper. He lashed out with increasing frequency, especially beyond domestic borders where restraints were looser. The more he was limited at home, the louder he became elsewhere. Our class attempted to frame these reactions as displays of strength, but strain reveals itself in cadence. Internally, we reassured one another. Public memory is short, we would say. Attention shifts. Cycles turn. This, too, shall pass. Yet outside our insulated rooms, something else was turning. Not rage, clarity. Clarity is quieter than anger. Clarity does not require shouting, it requires repetition. The image persisted, the truth persisted. People saw what they saw and knew what they knew. Within the More Lemon realm, a change that was most subtle and quite queer entered our collective posture. Not fear exactly. It was more like frantic calculation. We began preparing contingency plans. Statements were drafted in advance. Denials were pre-measured carefully. All the while we maintained public composure. Composure is armor. But armor grows very heavy when it is worn for far too long. The corrections had been issued. The language had been deployed. The color had been denied. And yet, the threads of the blanket remained what they were. Outside, the lanterns continued to glow. Inside the rooms of the More Lemon class, the air, though climate-controlled and still, felt thinner than ever before.
We didn't all gather at once. We didn't wake up one morning, unified. At first, we talked in kitchens. We talked over coffee that went cold while we compared perspectives. We talked in barber shops and on porches and in the backs of pickup trucks parked at the edges of fields.
Do you see it?
Yes.
I see it too.
It started that way, not with fury, with agreement. The image passed from hand to hand, printed on cheap paper, folded in coat pockets, tucked between pages of hymnals. Some tried to tell us the blanket was white. We held the page closer to the window. We tilted it toward sunlight. We saw what we saw. The debate was never complicated for us. It was simple. Either we trusted our own eyes, or we didn't. We chose, collectively, not to disbelieve our own senses, not to ignore our own common senses of higher discernment as a result of all we had managed to overcome together. We chose, instead, to remember our common humanity. The lantern meeting started without any formal coordination. A few neighbors lit candles outside the courthouse one evening. The next night there was more. We started calling them wisp fests. No one shouted instructions. No one demanded allegiance. Names were read aloud, Jenny Rude's among them. Silence followed each name, not the theatrical kind, but of solemn acknowledgement. The Noble Truths Network started sharing recordings of those gatherings. The audio was grainy and the signals were imperfect, but they were clear enough. "If you write it down, they may not erase it," was repeated often, especially during the earlier meetings. We, then, all of us, started writing. Ledgers were filled resolutely, dates were fastidiously noted, statements were copied with the utmost care. Not because we expected immediate justice, because we expected memory to matter. We started calling our coordinated civic efforts Whisperer Waves. That name drew a lot of attention. It inspired tons of excitement and increased our participation numbers exponentially. The Wanda Wynette tick tales were circulated widely. At first they were told to children sitting cross-legged near the front of lantern-lit assemblies. Soon they lined the shelves of Wanda's Wee Wonders preschool and many other places of learning. The first tale, Evander of the Meadow, became a beloved favorite for all audiences. Adults leaned closer than they meant to. The stories were not speeches, they were reminders. That birds return, that ground thaws slowly, that trees hold through rough winds. The more the tales were told, the steadier the gatherings became. Anger softened into resolve. Resolve is harder to disperse. We rediscovered that while hope may be weakened, it does not die easily. Our sense of hope burned in us like a blue-hot flame, a flame we all recognized. It provided much-needed solace as the difficult weeks under the Lemon regime dragged on. When word spread of caravans forming in the western hills, many Havenians hesitated. 13 days is a long commitment. Work waits for no one. Livestock must be fed. Children must be tended. Travel can drain already limited resources. But the phrase passed from person to person. 13 days to be good neighbors. It was not shouted, it was quietly decided by many individual people. We started walking and we loaded up our wagons, some horse-drawn, others roaring with combustion. We affectionately referred to this part of the movement as our Opus March. Some people joined for a day, then returned home. Others continued on. At each town, trustworthy information was offered and constituent signatures were collected. Not hurriedly and not coerced, steadily. We read the 13 sections of the Havenlight Covenant aloud as we moved. No office above the law, limits on executive power, protection of public care. The words were not dramatic, they were reasonable. That was their strength. President Lemon's voice still reached us, sharp, insistent, sometimes directed toward lands beyond our borders, and sometimes right at us. But the more his volume rose, the less it carried into our kitchens. We were no longer arguing about the shade of a blanket, we were discussing structure. How do we prevent this again? What do we change? What do we protect? The more Lemon class tried to push new controversies on us, new fears, new distractions. We found that distraction lost its force when clarity had already taken root. On the 13th day of the Opus March, the Capitol grounds filled beyond expectation. We did not arrive as a mob. We arrived as good neighbors. Farmers in worn boots, teachers with ink-stained hands, parents holding children who had learned the story of the Meadow Boy by heart. The covenant was read in full. Many times. We signed, one by one, not hurried, not theatrical, deliberate. The signatures stretched longer than anyone had predicted. When the final page was complete, there would be no roar, only an exhale that would move through the crowd like wind through wheat. The equinox approached. We did not force balance, we prepared for it. And when the day and night held equal length, the covenant would be ratified, not because we shouted, because we remained. Looking back, it is tempting to say the turning was inevitable. It was not. It required kitchens, porches, lanterns, ledgers, stories. It required that enough of us say, quietly and without apology, "I see what I see," and once enough of us said it together, the fever could not sustain itself. It thinned, just like the winter always does.
One morning, Wanda did not wake early. For once, she allowed the light to reach her. Before she opened her eyes, it slipped through the window in a thin, even band, not sharp, not dim, balanced. Isaac returned with the dawn that morning. He stood at the gate at the end of the path, listening to the quiet hum that seemed to live inside the little abode, before voices rose to meet the day. He turned his head when he saw Wanda come out onto the porch with her tea.
"It's that day,"
he said, not with urgency, with recognition. Wanda nearly dropped her cup and saucer, but managed to place them on the rail before rushing to greet him. With a long, warm hug, he dropped his bags and hugged her back. They spoke of many things: the bridge, the debates, the image of Janine. They discussed President Lemon and the Moore Lemon class and the long years that had kept them apart. The air held neither chill nor heat. The equinox, equal parts light and shadow. Isaac was finally home. They walked toward the Capitol with others, though no one had arranged to meet at a particular hour. People seemed to arrive, as if drawn by the same quiet understanding. Lantern poles still stood from previous gatherings. The grass bore the flattened memory of where crowds had sat, night after night. Isaac felt the weight of the folded parchment letter inside his coat, because he was responsible for it, because he had volunteered to carry it. For Edith, Tara, Tick. Wanda carried nothing in her hands. She preferred her hands free, free to greet, free to steady, free to sign. The covenant was read aloud again, not by one voice, by many. Each article passed from speaker to speaker. Equal voice in elections. No dynasties of wealth or power. Fair contribution to the commons. Wanda listened to the words as though hearing them for the first time, though she had helped shape their phrasing over the past months in small rooms with ink that smudged and candles that frequently burned low. Isaac watched the faces in the crowd. Business people, entertainers, public servants, people even brought their pets. No one looked electrified. They looked attentive. That steadiness moved him more than any roar could have. When it was the couple's turn to sign, they stepped forward together at first. Isaac in his military garb, and Wanda in her shawl. The Good Neighbors campaign was born out of a single photograph captured in that moment. Wanda went ahead, The table was plain wood, the inkwell nearly empty. She dipped the pen and paused, not from doubt, but in awareness. She thought of her mother, mixing paints at dawn. She thought of the birds, rebuilding their nest. She thought of the translucent boy who had once stood in her garden and then vanished. She sighed. Her hand did not tremble. Isaac stepped forward next. He did not hesitate. He signed beside her name, though not on the same line. The petition did not require adjacency to show shared intention. When he stepped back, their shoulders brushed. That small contact steadied them both. In that moment, Isaac took the folded parchment from his pocket and turned to Wanda.
Your mother entrusted this letter to my care many years ago, and my captain made me promise to bring it back to you when I finally made it home.
His eyes shifted downwards, betraying an emotional current he couldn't hide. Wanda slowly took the paper, and with steady hands, she unfolded it. In order to form a more perfect union. Wanda read for a moment, but looked up at Isaac.
She started it.
He said.
Started what?
Wanda asked, bewildered and a little breathless. Isaac smiled and reached down to flip over the last page of the letter, prominently at the top, in her mother's familiar script, read, "The Heavenlight Covenant, a proposal for a big, bipartisan bill." Wanda blinked through tears as she read through the unique sets of handwriting that had been accrued on the sheets. Some notes had been marked out and replaced. 13 sections had been painstakingly mapped out and discussed through haze to home. Wanda swallowed hard as she managed to ask,
She started the covenant?
Isaac smiled warmly and nodded once.
But it took all of us to finish it.
Wanda laughed and cried at the same time, and hugged Isaac more than once.
Then she's here with us.
Wanda said, gazing in awe at the neat penmanship she still found scrawled on papers here and there around Tick Cottage. Festive banners had been hung, food was arranged on long tables, and a microphone was affixed to an ornate podium on the stage. The space filled with smiling faces, and the crowd even spilled out, filling the streets for blocks round. At 10 a.m., Elodie Flame stepped up to the podium. First, she thanked the many people in attendance and asked for a moment of silence for all who were not among the survivors. Then she sang a song that had become something of an anthem for the Good Neighbors movement. God bless the broken child who never had a chance. The notes lingered in the air. Next, the 13 sections of the covenant were read aloud once more. This was the reason for the Opus March. People gathered from all across the country to sign this destiny-altering petition. Then Elodie welcomed Wanda to the podium to share a special surprise that only Wanda and Mr. Rude had known about. Wanda had witnessed a design in one of her dreams of impact. First, she saw Jenny again. She was standing motionless on an island just large enough to hold her, in the middle of the icy waters that she had been thrown into. The bridge loomed overhead, cold, hulking, and silent. Wanda could see her breath in the air. Jenny held her beloved blanket in the bend of her left arm, and her right thumb was in her mouth. Wanda smiled, feeling a rush of affection for her long-lost friend. The blanket started lifting at a corner, as if being taken by an unseen hand. Jenny dropped her arms to her sides as the blanket gently lifted and drifted slowly across the freezing water. Between them, as if it had a life of its own and was experiencing freedom for the first time. Wanda reached up to accept it as the enchanted cloth softly floated down to greet her. She immediately brought it to her cheek, closing her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, she was in her sewing room, back on Winnett Lane. She looked down, and what had been Jenny's blanket was now a beautiful flag. The background was baby blue, and there was a baby red spiral with 5 loops. Wanda's breath caught, and tears filled her eyes when she saw 13 stars scattered across the design. They were glowing baby peach, just like the blanket. When she awoke, Wanda had gotten to work right away, making the dream's vision a reality. Mr. Rude was let in on the secret project when he had been over to share a meal. Upon learning of the dream and of the stars Wanda had seen, he offered to contribute something precious, a piece of the blanket that he had kept when the rest was buried with his little girl. Wanda accepted reverently and used the threads to form the stars of the first flag of the United States of Heaven Light. Now, standing at the podium, Wanda revealed for the first time the new flag of a nation. People cheered and shed tears of joy as the final signatures were added to the covenant petition, and the flag was raised high above the square. As the evening progressed, memories were shared and plans were made. Finally, all of the suffering could be assigned reasons to some extent. All the sleepless nights of all the everyday warriors for truth, justice, and freedom could finally be reflected upon with a calm clarity. Peace was made widely, inwardly, and outwardly at last. President Lemon did not appear publicly the day of the Opus March culmination. He was not present for any part of the signing of the petition. Word had already spread of his retreat from certain responsibilities, of investigations no longer easily silenced, of voices once in unquestioning alignment with him, speaking more carefully now. The Moore Lemon class had grown quieter. It had not vanished. It was just quieter. The federal agent who attacked Jenny Rude had testified weeks earlier. His voice had carried neither defiance nor defense. Wanda had not attended that proceeding. She chose to plant saplings instead. Isaac read the transcript by lantern light and folded it away without comment. Some acts cannot be undone, but they can be named. Naming changes the air. No one knew for sure what became of President Lemon or many of his associates. After he was removed from government position, courts across the world transferred him around for the doling out of consequences after accountability had been served to him in Heaven Light. He was last known to have been in a prison in a poverty-stricken place, where he had facilitated atrocities as president. Local records were destroyed during civic unrest, triggered by his presence. Most people assume that, especially considering his notoriously frail condition, he passed away amidst the chaos. Rumors persisted, but only ever quietly. As the final signatures were collected, the crowd did not surge. It settled. Children began chasing one another near the steps. Vendors reopened storefronts that had closed during the reading and main events. Someone started humming a tune that sounded like something Elodie Flame might carry on a warmer evening. Wanda looked at Isaac.
Do you feel that?
She asked. He did not answer immediately. He searched himself, as though expecting some grand sensation. There wasn't one.
I feel balanced.
He said. She smiled.
Yes.
Balanced. They walked home slowly. They had no escorts. There were no banners along the road. Neighbors spoke of practical things. Who would serve on the truth councils? How to ensure transparent records? How to protect farmers from consolidation? The covenant did not end conversation. It began maintenance. Isaac felt the familiar warmth of Wanda's hand slipping into his, not for display, for contact. The Good Neighbors campaign had never belonged solely to them, but it had begun, in a way, with these two young people choosing not to stand on opposite sides of a line, choosing instead to look at one another and say, "Let's begin here." That evening, as light and dark folded evenly into one another, Wanda stood on the porch and watched the horizon. Ernest settled beside her, feathers fluffed. Isaac leaned against the railing. The sky held no spectacle, just balance. In the quiet, Wanda thought of the baby peach spiral. Above her childhood bed, 5 loops, extending outward, returning inward, not a crown, an anchor. The fever had surely not disappeared from the world, but it no longer ruled the air in heaven light. And that was enough for one era.
When I assumed this office, the air and haven light had already begun to settle. The covenant was signed and ratified 2 years before my election. What I inherited was responsibility. History prefers to name moments after the loudest voices, yet the turning of haven light was not loud. It was persistent. The Good Neighbors campaign was not a spectacle. It was a practice. I campaigned not on a promise of transformation, but on a promise for maintenance. That distinction matters. In the years following the covenant, several visible changes took root. Oversight, or truth. Councils were enacted. Emergency authorities were codified with expiration. Public communication channels were required to disclose funding and corrections. The courts operated with renewed transparency. These adjustments were not dramatic, they were structural. The Morlaman era did not vanish in a single stroke. Its habits lingered in institutions and in memory. But habits weaken when examined consistently. President Lemon's term is now recorded in full, neither erased nor embellished. The documents are publicly archived. We do not rewrite what occurred. We document it. We refuse to forget it or to repeat it. Beyond the Capitol, something else grew. In the Appalachian region, land long dormant, under unclear ownership, was transferred through legal process to Wanda Winnett-Tick. The acreage was significant. It contained natural hot springs long known to locals, but never developed. Wanda and Isaac did not build a monument there. They built rings. At the center, a residence, not a palace, a home. Around it, community housing for those in need of stability. Further outward, grounds for travelers. Beyond that, sanctuary for animals in recovery. Then a burial forest, where those who wished could return to soil beneath planted trees. And finally, a carefully regulated ring of commerce. At the perimeter, home goods, crafts, food, and beverage, the layer where the wider world intersected the grove, directly. The site became known as Winnett Lane. Visitors arrived first. In curiosity, they returned. In recognition. The hot springs gained international attention right away. This, the first of what came to be called sacred groves, did not isolate the people of Havenlight from the world. It demonstrated structure. I visited the Winnett Lane Sacred Grove, during my first year in office. No formal announcement preceded the trip. I walked the outer ring first. Commerce was modest and orderly. No banners bore my name or any other political figure. There were only booths for voter registration, and above each was hung a copy of the Havenlight Covenant, serving as reminders of what really matters when taking part in a democracy. In the burial forest, saplings marked recent interments. Small wooden plaques held only dates and simple words. In the animal sanctuary, I watched a rescued draft horse lean its head into Isaac's shoulder, as though greeting an old friend. Wanda met me near the inner ring. She did not bow, and I did not expect her to. We spoke briefly of water regulation, of soil health, of how to maintain public access without compromising the grove's ethics. Before leaving, I asked her one question. "Does it feel finished?"
"No,"
she said.
"It feels finely tended to."
That was the best answer. The new era we have entered is one of communal healing. The Noble Truths Network expanded quickly as well. It remained decentralized, as mapped out by a group that called themselves the Seven Guides. Its mandate remained simple: record accurately, correct transparently, archived publicly. Electrical systems and plumbing infrastructure continued developing steadily through organized engineering and public will. The pace accelerated at times, then paused during rolling outages, when systems strained under growth. Each failure was logged, each repair was documented, maintenance was applied. Again and again, progress takes time and effort. The spring equinox continues to shift slightly, year by year. As it always has, balance is not fixed to a calendar date. It arrives when it arrives. Each year, citizens gather at the Capitol to reread the covenant. There are no fireworks. There are signatures added to the ledger, not amendments, but reaffirmations. I attend when schedule allows. When I do, I stand among my constituents, never above them. The fever years are now taught in schools as a caution, not as myth. Students study the images from the bridge. They study the debates over the color of the blanket. They study the legal reforms that followed. They are encouraged to question authority, especially mine. That is a sign of healthy culture. The federal agents that attacked Jenny Rude and others now live quietly in a northern district. Their testimonies remain parts of the public archive. I have not sought them out. Redemption, as I have come to understand it, belongs less to individuals than to systems that prevent repetition. I was born in a different era than many of the principal public figures of the fever years. I did not walk with the caravans. I did not help draft the earliest language. Of the Havenlight Covenant, I was, as some once called me, the sleeping candidate. Perhaps that is fitting. A presidency ideally, should not be dramatic. It should be steady enough that citizens may focus on tending their own rings. If Havenlight remains balanced, not fevered, not frozen, then I will consider my terms sufficient. The Sacred Grove model continues to spread around the world. Within a decade, similar groves appeared in every other region of Havenlight. Each followed the same ring structure, but remained locally governed. The model spread, not as a franchise, but as a civic trust. The Winnett Lane Hot Springs continued to draw visitors. Year-round, the sacred burial forests are thickening. Children still learn the story of the boy of the meadow. And each equinox, whether it falls a day earlier or later, the people gather not to celebrate victory, but to confirm balance. That is enough. Festo Good, President of the United States of Havenlight.